Hello and welcome again to Sport Unlocked, the podcast guiding you through the week's sports news. Coming up, we'll take you inside the UEFA meetings that decided the future of the Champions League with an agreement that went down to the wire. Also, from the world of FIFA, just why did they split with their video game partner and what it means for them, EA, and gamers. There's also an update from the High Court in London and the Wagatha Christie battle between footballers' wives. And why the World Cup in rugby is going stateside. But as ever, joining me, Rob Harris from the Associated Press, Tariq Panja from the New York Times, and Martyn Ziegler from the Times. And Martyn, unfortunately, you couldn't make it out to Vienna to join us at the UEFA Congress, but good to see you back with us virtually on here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Sorry to miss that trip, and sort of an expensive bill, I think, for not travelling, but sort of personal circumstances intervened. But yeah, it was certainly a newsworthy trip out there, wasn't there? Lots of things happened, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, there was finally some resolution to, I guess, a years-long quest to get the future of the European club competitions, notably the Champions League, sorted out. We finally know what we're going to have post-2024.
Yeah, good to get some certainty at least, and we'll have more on that in-depth coming up later in the episode. Well, we had a bit of chance to enjoy some of Vienna's culinary delights, but there wasn't much sightseeing for us in Austria. One footballer, though, on his travels this week was Lionel Messi, flying into Jeddah. It wasn't actually a holiday, but the start of a sponsorship deal with Visit Saudi. And one glance at his posts on Instagram might make it seem he was on some United Nations agency trip, but actually it was a start of a sponsorship deal with the Saudi tourism body. He did post about being impressed by a UNESCO heritage site that Messi said mixes charm with heritage and provides an unforgettable experience. Unforgettable or unacceptable?
That raises a lot of questions for me, because obviously that regime is under a lot of scrutiny, criticism from human rights groups, but it didn't stop Lionel Messi signing up with them. He already earns a fair whack playing for the Qatar-owned Paris Saint-Germain, and you wonder if he cares about any of the reputational issues that are associated with it. One thing I noticed was he is also an ambassador of UNICEF. UNICEF, which earlier this year said that as many as 10,000, or a few more than that, 10,000 children have been killed in the Saudi-led coalition's war in Yemen. I just wonder how these athletes and their teams square all this together when they sign these deals.
Well, I don't think they do even consider it, really. And it's not just Messi, is it? I mean, we've just had sort of the most sort of remarkable, to me, sort of witless comments from Greg Norman, the former golfer, who's sort of leading this breakaway golf tournament backed by Saudi Arabia, who incredibly was asked about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi by the Saudis in Istanbul. And his response was, "We've all made mistakes, and you just want to learn from those mistakes and how you can correct them going forward." I mean,
so he said it's like a typo.
Well, not so much that, but like it's when you say something you don't mean, and then you learn from that. I don't know. Honestly, it's just the most sort of thoughtless thing you could possibly say, and not surprisingly, Khashoggi's his partner, Hatis Kengis, has reacted, saying she's been very, very hurt by what he said.
And what we heard from Norman is the fact he hasn't even met Mohammed bin Salman. So there he goes and talks about all the changes that are taking place in the country. But who is he actually hearing this from? Is he just taking sort of briefing notes that he's getting from the country? And at the same time, he adopts this position that you hear from so many in trying to justify these sorts of deals that, well, there are lots of countries that can't be proud of their past and what they've done. So, yeah, there's a new generation now.
Yeah, guys, Rob, you might remember we talked about another golfer making similar comments, or witless comments as Martyn described them, Phil Mickelson, when he kind of told a biographer that, look, he called them, I don't want to misquote him, but he referenced the murder of Khashoggi, but he said the money was almost too good to turn down. I believe that's what he said. Then he kind of suspended himself from golf up until when? Up until now, it seems, because he's going to take part in this Saudi Invitational Golf Open.
Yeah, this is all the build up to the first event of this new series that's going to be just north of London in St Albans, the LIV Golf Investments. And this series that's causing huge controversy because still the PGA Tour is denying waivers to allow players to go and participate in the Saudi Finance League. I just wonder if the pressure from players wanting to take the cash will become so forceful that the existing tours do cave in, but at the moment they are standing firm.
I can see them caving in, unfortunately, or depending on which way you look at this, because the players are the game. And if this group has decided they're going to take the money, it's going to be very hard for golf to hold the line. Can I just got a funny thing happened recently related to this? I met chief executive of a club, and I asked about Saudi money and whether they've been offered it because they've been spraying it around liberally across sport. And the guy said they had, but it wasn't enough. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, because of the reputational damage, it has to be a really high number, and that number hadn't been reached. And I said, so what? If they do offer you an enormous number, you're going to take it. And he said, quite frankly, inevitably they will, because the number is going to be so big. And I think that's where we are, aren't we? In sport, it's however big the check is, the moral lines seem to move.
And it was big enough for Mike Ashley. And now Newcastle United reportedly have a new third kit coming out. The pictures have supposedly leaked online in the colours of the Saudi Arabian national team kit. So, of course, no control of Newcastle from the kingdom at all, the Premier League assured everyone last year.
Having dealt with a lot of sort of frustrated Newcastle United supporters and social media during the whole takeover, who sort of objected to the fact that as writing stories about Saudi Arabia's state links. I'm sure there's lots of people will be rushing out and buying those third strips and doing the sport washing job perfectly for Saudi Arabia.
Of course, Newcastle's ambition is to head into the Champions League eventually. Their priority has been achieved this season, which was just staying in the Premier League for now. And looking forward, perhaps their chances of getting into the Champions League have been made slightly easier. They could get in there slightly earlier because effectively from 2024, England is going to have 5 Champions League spots. And perhaps Newcastle are the ones who benefit from the changes to the new format that went down to the wire on Tuesday in Vienna. And this is all about when the Champions League from 2024 expands from 32 to 36 teams. That was a done deal. That was not up for negotiation. What was the number of games in the group stage, which will now be 8 rather than the 10, still up from the 6 now, and how to distribute those extra 4 slots in the Champions League. Not group stage, it won't be, because actually it's a single table of 36 teams, which we'll get into the exact format in a moment. But it's 2 of those particular new spots that's of interest because they were going to be based on historic coefficient. So which were the most successful teams the previous 5 years in Europe who hadn't already qualified through their domestic leagues. Newcastle obviously wouldn't have a high coefficient, but now the new plan that is being in place from 2024 will mean 2 of those extra spots go to the 2 countries collectively with the best record in Europe just the previous season. England's always way up there. And so that means there'll be a 5th automatic qualification place for the Champions League from England. That's quite a lot of information, wasn't it? Hope you're keeping up with me.
Very well explained, Rob. Very well explained. I kept up with you. I hope everyone else has.
So if that system had been enforced this season, then the extra spots would go to England and Holland because Feyenoord would have reached the Europa Conference League final. So I think the fact that the Europa Conference League is now up and running may mean it's not always the big nations. There's scope perhaps for smaller ones to get that extra spot. But I think the most important thing is they've ditched the club coefficient. So that would have had this crazy situation. For example, if Manchester United had finished 5th, they would have gotten the Champions League. But if West Ham United had finished 5th, they wouldn't have done. Now, whoever finishes 5th, whatever their club ranking, they will qualify. And I think that was the most controversial aspect of the proposal. So, that's been ditched. The other change, which we've previously predicted on this podcast, is that they're going to be 8 group matches. So that's 2 more than at the moment, but not the 10 that was originally planned for the new format.
So of those 4 extra places in the Champions League, 2 based on country ranking the previous year. So explain how are the other 2 spots divvied up?
So the one of those is going to go to provide a third automatic spot for the 5th ranked country. So that's either going to be France or Portugal. They'll get 3 automatic places. And then the final one will go to the national champions who don't qualify automatically now. So that'll probably be Serbia or Scotland. So there's there's a bit of something for everybody. But what do you think, Tariq? Do you think this is fair, or is it a sort of thin end of the wedge?
I think it's a bit of a compromise, and I also think, first of all, I think from where we were in 2021, the great opportunity of recalibrating European football after those Super League guys tried to do what they did. I don't think we have had that at all. Like this, any great big changes. It's more of the same. This is, of course, the new Champions League with that Swiss model system.
That's 36 teams in a single standings, teams playing 8 different opponents in the first phase, the top 8 of the 36 qualifying automatically for the round of 16, teams 9 to 24 then going into a playoff round to determine the other last 16 places. So it's getting more complicated as well as bigger.
On the extra places, I think the Premier League will always have 5 from 2024. It's so rich. Its teams will always do very well. So it's that one other. And I was talking to someone who is associated with the Premier League. And as a league, it might not be great because under this system, you're going to have 5. And a UEFA official told us that under the most extraordinary circumstances, that 5 could be as many as 7 English teams in the Champions League. Now, if you're the Premier League, there is a fear that all these Premier League teams playing against each other in another competition might dilute the value of their competition. So there is that. But for me, in general, I think, they've come up with a halfway house, a thing that doesn't make everybody angry and doesn't make everybody happy, but not, I suppose, a great revolution for the small and medium-sized club. Nothing about competitive balance has improved as a result of this. So let's see.
Well, just to remind how we actually got to this point, it was only 3 years ago that UEFA themselves presented a proposal which would have seen 24 out of the 32 Champions League places locked in and teams not having to qualify each year at all. That was a sort of quasi-Super League, one that was cooked up with Andrea Agnelli, who was head of the European Club Association before the Super League, plotting its downfall, and the Juventus chairman was working with the UEFA president on that. There was a backlash that killed off those plans. Again, the latest set of proposals did lead to a backlash from those middle-class clubs and some of the leagues. And I suppose UEFA have shown their willingness to listen, to engage, to actually change the plans under the weight of pressure before perhaps the focus of the criticism really comes on them, which it would have done further down the line. And how this week unfolded on Monday, the European Club Association leadership met in Madrid. They had presentations from UEFA. They were still going through the potential alternative scenarios. Then on Tuesday morning, when we were in Vienna, the UEFA Club Competitions Committee met, and that's where they were finalising this settlement. And one thing we were told, there was someone who wasn't quite up to speed watching the presentation because they had their hand up virtually, someone who couldn't make it into the room in Vienna and was desperate to speak. And eventually, when he was called on to speak, just went and complained about something that had already been scrapped.
He was, Jason, but it was also really interesting in terms of how, to get a window into how football governance works, a lot of these people aren't paying any bloody attention. This guy, and I won't name him, but it was from Italy, was complaining bitterly about the old system that won't be in place. So he went on a massive rant about something that wasn't going to happen.
Well, yeah, it's the perils of falling asleep in the Zoom call, isn't it?
Well. Talking about falling asleep, Rob and I were sat next to each other at the UEFA Congress, and it's quite dark in that room, and it's a little bit warm, and to Rob's left, one of the journalists had fallen asleep so hard that the sound of snoring threatened to overcome the sound of the people making their speeches from the rostrum. Not right, Rob?
Yeah, it might have reflected how routine and mundane the UEFA Congress was. It didn't have the fireworks of ones in the past, and even Gianni Infantino in his speech was quite bland, quite non-divisive. I mean, one interesting moment actually came. We're in this sort of cavernous hall, and everyone's already in place in the room, and the last person to enter when it's about to get underway is actually Infantino himself, and that meant Sheffrin had to come down from the stage to greet him. Infantino arriving as the great global figure almost to warrant this big welcome in front of everyone.
Power move was noticed.
Did you notice, by the way, that in Sheffrin's speech, when he talked about this, everyone who was against the Super League, he he went through like just about the whole of the football family, saying the opposition of the national associations clubs, but he didn't mention FIFA being against it.
Well, that's because they weren't, and I think I wrote that that they gave enough encouragement to these guys to carry on with whatever it is they wanted to do. In the end, he obviously shifted position and gave that speech at the UEFA Congress last year to slap it down. But there was a suggestion that they did maybe not a tacit support, but maybe some private encouragement to go ahead with it.
Yeah, still no complete denials from FIFA when we've asked them about whether Infantino was conspiring with the Super League plotters. He's obviously tried to distance himself from it since then. And this is what Sheffrin actually did say to the UEFA Congress about the defeat of the Super League, which was only a year ago.
My friends, when UEFA is at one with its member associations, its clubs, its leagues, its players, its coaches, supporters, commercial and TV partners, the IOC, Brussels, and every single European government in opposing an arrogant, contemptuous plan devised by a handful of billionaires who cannot embrace the concept that on the football pitch, as in life, you might lose to someone who is smaller than yourself. And in this case, football is the winner as well.
So that was the UEFA president, Alexander Sheffrin. Earlier, we'd heard from Infantino in his speech, which was bobbling along with fairly bland sort of statements, and he was rambling at times, and then he said this.
Now, speaking about the future, and the near future in particular, of course, I have to speak as well about the next FIFA World Cup. From the 21st of November to the 18th of December, you are all welcome to Qatar. Congratulations, of course, to the teams that made it. Best of luck to those who still have to play a couple of games to maybe make it. We all wish, obviously, that a European team wins that World Cup. And before anyone starts writing, I say this to Tariq and my other friends from the media, I said the same and will say the same at the Congress of South America for the South Americans, of Africa for the Africans, of upcoming congresses of Asia and so on and so forth. I wish them all that they win.
That was a freewheeling Gianni Infantino suddenly having Tariq's name in his head and certainly feeling quite prickly. He's been, shows that we've, got into his head. We know this podcast is a particular delight, well listened to within FIFA HQ. It's passed in terms of what we say each week, as well as tweets and articles as well.
I think you should take that as a compliment, Tariq.
Yes, collectively, I think we're just doing our job and reporting as we see it. Maybe we could have a bit more time and give Gianni a chance to respond and discuss things a bit more. And maybe he feels things have been lost in confusion. So I guess, Rob, an invitation to
he's always welcome on the pod. And the fact is, actually, when we are around the Congress floor, we do talk to these people. They're not completely running away from us and blanking us, at least in that scenario. So contrary to the perception that might be gathered by some listeners, we do attempt to have a
Yeah,
dialogue.
I think that's right. You had a chance maybe to have a chat with some of these people, and to be fair to Gianni, when the opportunity allows, fleetingly, we do. He doesn't blank us. We do have a chance to maybe chat with him behind stage.
Well, one of the things actually was a keen topic of conversation when I saw him was video gaming, which is not the usual thing we're engaging in the world of football politics, but actually a really significant move did happen this week. End of that big partnership between FIFA and EA Sports after 30 years. And to an older generation, it might not mean much. It might just seem like some side video product, but it's a big source of revenue for FIFA. It's a big source of revenue for EA Sports, the FIFA game. And the brand, the FIFA name, is perhaps more synonymous with many football fans as a video game than a governing body that's been rife with corruption in the past.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating story. Just before we discuss it, just a little straw poll. When was the last time you guys had a game of FIFA?
I could tell you exactly where I was.
Yeah,
I was with Tom Morgan
yeah.
from the Telegraph at Graham Dunbar from the AP's house in Geneva, playing against Graham's kids, who absolutely battered us. And that was
September.
about 6 months
September,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Well, I played last week against my son. We played Manchester City against Liverpool. I was Liverpool, and I think I held my own, but ended up losing.
You're falling into Pep Guardiola's claim this week that all the media are Liverpool fans.
Yes, actually, I'm an Arsenal fan, but their team's too weak.
Revelations on the pod. Yeah, I'm a bit further back since I've actually played the FIFA game, but also, for me, I played the Madden game. That was my association with NFL in many ways. Tony Hawk with skating as well. So it just shows how actually these video games are a really significant touch point for people with the sport when they might not actually watch the live version taking place in reality.
Just talk through why FIFA have basically parted company, because I mean, the game as people know it is going to remain, but under another name, isn't it?
That's right. So again, hugely popular. Rob said the commercial relationship with FIFA is been so successful. It's FIFA's highest year-on-year commercial income as well. It represents about $150 million a year in license fees from EA. So they're going to have to quickly replace that. And for EA, this game's made billions. They've sold 350 million individual copies of this FIFA game over the years. And what happened is it was a 10-year contract that was all encompassing. And since then, the world has changed. The world's all sorts of digital products are out there and the way people game. FIFA did not want to give EA this broad sweeping exclusivity, and they wanted double their money. And for that, EA thought that's a bit rich. We don't get what we want. And they've created what will be a new name called EA Sports FC, essentially a football club. And the launch, after we published this story, involved almost all of football except FIFA going on their social channels and saying they're in the club. So Premier League clubs, Bundesliga clubs, UEFA, you name it, they're all in the club.
It's interesting that one of the reasons EA Sports wanted the partnership to end to some degree was how this actually conflicts with some of the political battles in the world of sport as well. So looking ahead to the big Finalissima, the meeting of the European and South American champions at Wembley in June, Italy against Argentina, that UEFA Common Ball deal, it was pointed out to me, well, how would they advertise the game at this event? They'd be putting FIFA around the pitch, and this is an event that is actually seemingly designed to undercut FIFA because it's a match up between UEFA and Common Ball as their commercial operation with the new office in London that's coming. So EA is getting a cleaner brand as well, and it believes that because it has all these licensing deals with the leagues and other entities around the world, that actually it will still have the superior game. While they do know there will be the potential for brand confusion because FIFA are determined to have a new product in place already for 2023 that will be called FIFA 24. And obviously, the comments of Gianni Infantino are going to cause some challenges within FIFA, but there's now pressure on them to deliver a product because Infantino was really full of the hyperbole, saying that I can assure you that the only authentic and real game that has the FIFA name will be the best one available for gamers and football fans, and that it will remain forever the best. Well, sure, Infantino's no gamer, but now someone's got to get.
Rob, was that word best capped up?
It was, yes.
Yeah.
No pressure, lads.
It did look like a statement reminiscent of a recent US president, certainly the forcefulness and the authenticity of his words.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is they're not going to have the sort of unique selling point in where the players, the club you support, you can be that player, and they look like that player, visually. And FIFA's new game is not going to have that, as far as I can tell. I think they're going to really struggle to match the income from this that they've had. To me, it seems like a really strange decision.
Yeah, the other interesting part on the exclusivity currently, it really impinges on EA's ability to get other companies into the game. For example, FIFA's partners, say Adidas, they wouldn't want Nike promotions inside the game. As a result of this kind of breakaway, EA can have Nike, for example, and all sorts of other companies inserted in the game. And in the press release announcing the separation, I did note that there was a comment from Nike, so you can see the direction some of this is going at. And again, none of us are clearly computer experts, and I don't want to, get us knee deep in stuff we don't understand. But this word idea of metaverses and digitalization tokens, all this other stuff that I guess we have, I suppose, criticised a bit on here. I think all of that will play a part in both FIFA's future and EA's.
What some people might not be fully aware is that once you buy the game, that's not the end of your spending relationship with EA at the moment, because there's the ultimate team mode in their sports games where you do buy extra content, extra players to add into the game. And this actually generated $1.623 billion for EA in 2021. The overall revenue for EA Sports was $6.19 billion. That was in the annual report this week. So that is a huge part of the proportion of their profits as well. And what was also interesting, buried deep within the EA annual report, as we often see, all companies have to put their risk factors in. And what EA declared to their investors is that any events or circumstances that negatively impact our FIFA franchise, such as product or service quality, or increased competition, could negatively impact our financial results to a disproportionate extent. So there is a risk for EA potentially losing this FIFA name, and beyond that, yet another product coming on the market as well.
Yeah, it always amused me actually. So, through all the sort of FIFA scandals, you think of all the corruption things we've reported on in the last 20 years, and yet EA Sports was happy to be connected with it. To me, that always seemed a bit strange thing, but there we go.
Well, perhaps it's because commercially the brand was still a big success, and for many fans, they sort of disassociated the governing body with the game, although that's pretty hard to do in 2015, given the global nature of that story and the arrest going all around the world and it being sort of a hugely significant moment. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting one, not only in terms of the revenue that FIFA will look to now bring in, that EA will look to try to maintain and actually increase, but what it means for gamers worldwide. And there's one group of people who will be successful for sure out of all this, which will be players who will be signed up to be backing the game, either of them to be the face of them, signed up for marketing campaigns, because EA are going to have to reinforce that theirs is the supreme game as they see it, and FIFA are going to have to sign up players to sell their new products as well.
Well, you mentioned players and FIFA's new game. The difficulty here is, over the years, this game works. Part of the authenticity is the stadiums are the real stadiums. Most of the team names are the real team names. The shirts are the same. EA has been picking up long-term licensing deals, a lot of them on an exclusive basis, meaning that in their game, what you see when you go to a stadium or on a live match on TV is what you see in the game. FIFA isn't able to replicate that because of those exclusive licenses. So what it will have is going to be interesting to see. It's going to have obviously the FIFA World Cup because that's theirs, but then are they going to have, I don't know, Kylian Mbappe in a French shirt playing for France, or are they going to have some trouble with that? I think there might be some choppy waters ahead for anyone trying to challenge this existing game, given all those licensing restrictions.
Yeah, I think we've had on a very small scale a sort of indication of these problems already. For example, like if you look at the FIFA game at the moment, Juventus aren't in it. The players are in it, and there's a sort of team who play in black and white called Piemonte Calcio. But because of a deal that Juventus signed with Konami, which is the sort of the biggest rival to the FIFA game, Juventus's name isn't in it, and I think we're going to be seeing much more of those, both either for the EA Sports game or the new FIFA game, whatever that is.
And Manchester United also have a deal with Konami as well. That's for the eFootball game that used to be Pro Evolution Soccer, produced by the Japanese firm. And what you get in that game is, yes, Manchester United appear, but then they're playing a generic Merseyside club as well with a new name that's curated.
So what are Manchester United called in the FIFA game?
No, they're in the FIFA game. I don't know why they're in it and Juventus aren't, but they are in it.
Well, that's because of the deal with the Premier League that licenses all the names, but they can go and strike their own deals.
Got you. Yeah.
Well, there you go. So there's the complications, I guess, right there. Moving on.
What's the Merseyside team called in Konami?
I've actually been searching it while we've been on. I think it is Merseyside Red. It was actually mentioned to someone to me this week. So I'm no expert in that, but some of these games are actually free, and that's a way of initially getting the audience hooked. I never imagined we'd spend so long talking about gaming on this pod, given Tariq's resistance to esports.
Yeah, first and last time we devote this much time, please, guys.
While we're talking about World Cups, we should get back to some of the real sports and actually another sports World Cup, and it's the Rugby World Cup, which is heading to the United States for the first time. The men's edition is going to be there in 2031 and the women's version in 2033.
Yeah, I think there might be a bit of they're thinking of moving it to the summer, aren't they? Because there's going to be a clash with the NFL. So they're thinking of moving the Men's Rugby World Cup in 2031 to July and August. Normally it's sort of played October, November. But it's obviously it's a big thing for the sport and a big thing for rugby union in the United States. It'll be interesting to see if it takes off.
Yeah, and it comes at a time when the Football World Cup's obviously going to the US, Mexico, and Canada in 2026, and that'll be used by FIFA to grow not just the men's game, but the women's game as well in North America. Then you've got the Olympics in 2028 in Los Angeles, when football and rugby sevens will be in the games. Then you've got these Rugby World Cups. So you've got rugby and football trying to expand their audiences, trying to get new players competing. So it's quite a crowded market, isn't it, to sort of bring across youngsters to their sports, perhaps instead of to NFL, NBA, and the NHL, or perhaps it's just a large country, so there's enough for all to go around.
One thing that the US sports spectators like, they love an event, and if they can make it a day out and put a big show on, you can get a crowd. And cricket is another sport that's looking to hold events in the United States. As you said, it's a big country, and it's also a wealthy place, and a place that knows how to put on a show. So it's no great surprise that event organisers, governing bodies want some of that US razzmatazz.
Well, the one thing missing from the rugby announcement was razzmatazz, because it was planned for the afternoon European time with a big announcement, which still did happen as a reveal in Dublin, but World Rugby had actually announced it in a tweet and online a few hours earlier, so it was already a known outcome anyway, but they still managed to sort of remove any sort of drama or show element to the announcement in the end.
Was that intentional, or did someone have a fat finger?
No, I think that was intentional, but it's a bit strange. I mean, just to mention the other announcements, because I mean, I don't know what is it if it's a good thing to announce these tournaments, years and years and years away. So, we've got the women's Rugby World Cup in 2025 is going to be in England, and then the 2029 is going to be in Australia, and then 2033. So we're talking, 11 years time is going to be in the USA. And then the Men's World Cup, they've also announced 2027 is going to be in Australia as well. So there's sort of there's not much sort of uncertainty over what's going to be happening, or sort of driving interest around bidding, for example, over the next few years. That's for sure.
Perhaps we'll look for other areas for sporting entertainment, and perhaps the most unexpected place for that was actually the High Court in London this week, with the big battle between the footballers' wives. This is Wayne Rooney's wife, Colleen, up against Jamie Vardy's wife, Rebecca, and it's a libel action taken out by Rebecca Vardy against Colleen Rooney over a post a few years ago on social media, which was blaming Rebecca Vardy's account for leaking information from Colleen about her private life to a newspaper. And beyond even the initial claims, this libel action, which has now made it to the High Court, has actually seemed to just create further damage for Rebecca Vardy, as we've heard yet more about her relations with the media this week.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted out, if the idea of suing for libel is to restore your damaged reputation, then surely for Rebecca Vardy, this has been the worst possible decision, even if she wins, because it appears that, from what we've seen, messages to her agent, that, she was involved in leaking stories and involved in saying horrible things about people. So it's, you can understand why she's been in tears in the witness box, because it's, her reputation now is sort of has been really damaged much more, I would argue, by this actual court case, much more than it was beforehand. It is, and I mean there are some funny elements to it, but there's also some serious stuff. People who've been the sort of the victims of having stories leaked about them, and also her agent, who whether or not she is to sort of blame in part for what has been happening. The court's heard she's not mentally well enough to give evidence. She's been having suicidal thoughts. So yeah, you can see why the drama is so riveting, but it's certainly a strange one.
No, I agree. I was thinking the same there. I mean, like as you said, a lot of it is kind of amusing, and people have been using that popcorn emoji over the last week or so related to it. And there are some bizarre stories, but God, they're real people, aren't they? And to have all of this sort of raked out in public it's ridiculous. It should never have come to this. Also, Rob, the relationship between people in the public eye and tabloid journalists has really been exposed in this trial. It's how the sausage is made. It's not pretty, is it?
No, and it shows actually, according to this, how Rebecca Vardy's side was involved in not just handing over frivolous stories to the media, but also about Riyad Mahrez not turning up for Leicester training in 2018, and he left to join Manchester City eventually a few months later. And we as journalists often wonder where stories have come from that rivals have got, and you can theorize over the source of them if there's some big motivation, but certainly based on this one fragment, you'd see actually it was just a footballer's wife wanting to hand over potentially some information to the media, whether or not to help herself in terms of how that paper treats her to some degree, rather than actually particularly caring about Mahrez himself.
Yeah. The other thing was it's a very toxic world, whether it's the kind of celebrity sports world, isn't it? I mean, it's just the level of bitterness and one-upmanship that sort of exists among this cohort is being very clear, and it just doesn't feel very, very healthy at all.
Yeah, and you get a sense when perhaps one person feels another footballer's wife is getting more attention, or in Rebecca Vardy's case, wanting to be pictured at a particular game, wanting to make the headlines, wanting to be seen in the sort of non-sports pages out and about as well. And yeah, it's pretty unedifying, and perhaps no one wants to see some of their WhatsApp sort of discussed in public and disseminated, but this was a case that Rebecca Vardy brought herself, and it's led to this.
Yeah, and I think, with things like WhatsApp messages going missing, saying she couldn't confirm or deny whether she'd lost WhatsApp messages due to having a new phone. I thought it was a strange thing. And we've talked about before this thing about her agent's phone being dropped into the North Sea, sort of, which was obviously unfortunate.
Yeah, an incredible arena for a sports drama to be playing out in the High Court, and that case does continue. But that about bringing us an end to this week's edition of Sport Unlocked, from battling footballers' wives to sports politicians battling to get Champions League deals and to video gaming. Quite a mix.
Yeah, it's great to catch up. Enjoyed that one, guys.
And thank you everyone for listening. As ever, you can send us any feedback at Sport Unlocked on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. But for now, whatever sport you're watching in the days ahead, enjoy it and goodbye.